Studio 47A was once where famous artists came to record their music. Now, it's sealed shut. They say if you play the old tapes, you'll hear another voice. Someone singing along, merging into every lyric, every breath. And sometimes, that voice laughs. One curious sound engineer reopened the studio to listen to the original recordings and discovered that he had been recorded too, even though he had never sung a note. Studio 47A sat silent in the industrial district east of Los Angeles, where fog and dust blended into a single gray haze each morning. The faded sign of Sunset Echo Recording clung to the wall, its paint peeling away to reveal rust beneath. Elliot Marsh stood before the metal door, an old key trembling in his hand. 10 years had passed since he last set foot inside. 10 years since the room had fallen quiet. Inside, the air felt thick, like sound itself had died. Mold crept across the padded walls, and only a few ceiling lights flickered weakly. Coiled cables lay beneath the console, and microphones still stood in place, as if someone had just left yesterday. Elliot flipped the main power switch, and a faint electric hiss echoed through the space, the first sound in a place once alive with music. He had been hired by the new owner to inspect the old equipment. Simple work: check, note, dismantle. Yet something deeper had drawn him back, something that never truly let him leave. He had once worked as a sound engineer for countless sessions at 47A, especially for Grace Nolan, the haunting voice of the 1990s. In 1997, Grace had abruptly retired after an incident no one ever explained. From that moment on, the studio had been sealed. On the control desk, Elliot found an unmarked tape box, labeled in silver marker, Session 947R. He smiled faintly, an old professional curiosity stirring within him. The tape machine still worked, though sluggishly. When he pressed play, the room filled with the crackle of time breaking open. A voice rose from the static. Grace Nolan's, warm, fragile, like a thread of glass. It was a ballad he had never heard before, slow and confessional. Elliot closed his eyes to listen. Then something made him open them again. Someone else was singing. At first, it was only breathing, soft and irregular, woven between the notes. Then it became clearer, a male voice, low and rough, mirroring Grace word for word, but never quite in sync. The voice seemed to anticipate her, sliding in just as she drew her final breath, as if it knew exactly when she would stop. It wasn't harmonizing, it was embedding itself. Elliot stopped the tape, rewound, and played it again. Then again. The voice remained, steady, deliberate, intentional. The female voice peaked at a clean 3x, but the other hovered unnaturally high, around 12.3x, nearly beyond the range of human hearing. For a moment, he felt someone standing behind him. A faint silhouette appeared in the studio glass, but when he turned, only a microphone stood alone in the dark. He switched the lights brighter. Nothing there. Just the reflexes of a man who'd spent too long chasing echoes. He tried to reason it out, a test recording, maybe a corrupted overlay. But when the song reached its end, the second voice laughed, a dry, exhausted laugh that seemed to come from behind the soundproof wall itself. Elliot froze. The laughter faded, but something in the room still hummed. The clock's second hand had stopped. Every light flickered once, and the tape began to rewind on its own. He stepped back, breath caught in his throat. The tape played itself. No Grace this time, only the second voice, slower now, heavier, dragging through each word. Near the end, through the static hiss, it whispered a single word. Elliot! The tape stopped. The studio fell into absolute silence once more. But Elliot knew what he had heard could not be a malfunction, because in all the archives of Studio 47A, his name had never appeared anywhere. Warren. That night, Elliot didn't go home. He sat alone in the control room, the cold white neon light washing over the dust-covered panels. Outside, rain began to fall, scattering across the tin roof in slow, rhythmic beats, like the sound of a tape rewinding itself. He powered up the old computer, linking the tape deck to a frequency analysis program, something he believed could explain every mystery, even the ones no one should listen to. On the screen, 2 sound waves appeared, the familiar voice of Grace Nolan, and another, deeper, stranger, almost alive. He filtered Grace's voice out, leaving only the second frequency. The playback was faint at first, like someone speaking underwater. Elliot raised the volume. The voice shifted, from whispering to singing, then breaking into static, like an ancient broadcast struggling to reach the present. Through the distortion, fragments emerged, scattered and incomplete. I was here before. I see you. Elliot froze. It wasn't Grace's voice, and it couldn't be a technical glitch. He opened another tape, then another. Each one carried the same hidden presence, buried beneath the hiss. But this time, it began matching him. When he leaned into the microphone and murmured a cautious, "Hello," the speakers answered back with his own voice. Same pitch, same breath, only half a second late. He cut the power to the entire room. The echo remained. Near midnight, Elliot drove to Grace Nolan's old apartment in the Hollywood Hills. A for sale sign swayed gently in the wind. The neighbors told him she had moved to a nursing home near Pasadena. He went there the next morning. She sat by the window, hair silver, eyes closed. When he introduced himself, she didn't look surprised, only opened her eyes and studied him for a long, silent moment. Elliot asked about the studio, about session 947A. She said nothing. Then, in a voice brittle as an old tape, she whispered, "You heard it too, didn't you?" He tried to ask what it was, but she cut him off with a single line. "It doesn't want to be forgotten. It only sings when it remembers someone." The words haunted him all the way back. Remembers someone. Can a voice remember? Elliot played the recording again, this time through the studio monitors at full volume. The second voice emerged instantly. No longer faint, no longer distant. It was clear, powerful, breathing. He checked the microphones. They were still off. On the frequency graph, the signal warped, twisting away from isolation as if resisting dissection. He adjusted the playback speed. The voice adapted, slower and slower, until the sound became a deep, rhythmic growl, pulsing like a heartbeat. Within that pulse, Elliot heard something else, footsteps, faint but undeniable. He turned. The room was empty. But the recording booth light had turned green. Someone was inside. He approached cautiously, hand trembling as he reached for the door handle. Cold air spilled out, sharp and heavy, like the breath of an open freezer. Inside, the darkness seemed to absorb the light. The microphone in the center chair trembled ever so slightly, though no breeze moved. Elliot glanced back at the control monitor. The waveform was still moving. Someone was speaking. He raised the volume. "Don't stop the tape." Elliot stumbled backward. The voice spoke again. "You left me here." He yanked every power cord from the wall. The speakers went silent. Then, seconds later, the voice returned, louder, clearer, echoing from inside the concrete itself. In that moment, Elliot understood the most horrifying truth of all. The voice was no longer imitating Grace. It was speaking in his own voice. For 3 nights straight, Elliot didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the song returned, looping endlessly inside his skull, as if the tape had never stopped spinning. The more he tried to forget, the clearer it became, not just in his ears, but in his bones, in his heartbeat, pulsing like a rhythm that didn't belong to his own body. He began researching everything about Studio 47A. Records showed that the land had once been a military radar station during World War II, used for high-frequency ultrasonic experiments. After the war, the government sold it to a private owner, leaving the old transmission wiring buried deep within the walls. A thought crept into Elliot's mind. If the studio was built atop that network, perhaps the second voice wasn't from this world at all, but from somewhere between them. The next morning, he returned with a frequency detector and spectral filters. As soon as he powered the machines, the air trembled with a faint metallic hum, like a string drawn too tight. Everything in the room seemed to quiver, touched by an invisible current. Elliot adjusted the range between 12 and 13 Kh, the range where the voice usually appeared. On the monitor, the waveform began to flutter erratically, drawing a double Sinai pattern that looked disturbingly like a heartbeat. Then the singing began, not from the tape, not from the speakers, but directly from the air itself. At first, it was a sustained tone, then words, distorted but unmistakable. "Can you hear me?" Elliot froze. No one else was in the building. Every cable was unplugged. Yet the light on the studio microphone flicked on, without command. He opened the recording channel, and what happened next made his chest tighten in terror. His own voice echoed back from one of the old tapes. Rewinding, he listened carefully. The words were not something he had spoken aloud. They were his thoughts, repeated half a beat late, as if something was listening to him think and answering through sound. On the monitor, text appeared automatically. New input detected. Elliot had never seen the system respond like that. The secondary waveforms split off, repeating in precise, rhythmic intervals. Not as audio, but as code. Morse code. He copied and translated it. The decoded message read, "Stay with me." The air grew dense, heavy, suffocating. Elliot felt his pulse sync with the oscillating wave on screen. Inside his head, the voice began whispering, not through the speakers, but within his mind. "I know why you left. I remember her." The words froze his blood. It couldn't be. There was only one person he had ever left behind. Laura, his girlfriend who died in a car accident in 1993, when their car slid off a canal road. He was the only one who survived. He had never spoken of her to anyone. The waveform on the monitor spasmed violently, and a faint image began to take shape within the noise, a blurred reflection, like a face forming out of static. A woman's outline flickered amid the gray interference, her lips moving silently as the other voice began to sing Grace Nolan's song. "If I fade, will you remember me?" The lights flickered uncontrollably. A burnt smell filled the room. the cables glowing red before one of the monitors burst with a soft pop. Elliot lunged for the power switch, but the system refused to die. In the dark, the spectral display still pulsed a steady green, persistent, mechanical, like an artificial heartbeat. Then came laughter, close, too close, right behind him. He spun around. Only the microphone stood in the darkness. Its cable shifted slowly, rising and falling like breath. Elliot staggered backward, heart hammering. A faint cracking sound echoed through the room, and then silence. When he turned back to the screen, a new file had appeared automatically. Session 1047. No grace, no human voice, just a long, low, resonant sound, like a heartbeat buried deep beneath the ground. Elliot shut the system down and stepped into the hallway. But as soon as he opened the door, he heard it, his own voice singing softly from inside the room, a single line carried on a whisper. I was here before you. Nina. Elliot returned to the studio at night, the hour when Los Angeles seemed to stop breathing. The city outside still roared, but inside the narrow house at 47A, every sound was swallowed whole. He didn't turn on the lights. Only the faint blue glow from the computer screen lit his tired, ashen face. Dark circles sank beneath his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly. On the desk lay the reel labeled Session Scene 47A, still unsealed. Elliot stared at it as though staring at his own reflection, distorted, old, looping endlessly. Something demanded completion, a recording unfinished, a final note unsung, and he was the only one left to sing it. He powered up the system. The studio lights flickered to life, sweeping across a haze of floating dust like mist. The microphone stood upright in the center, its cables stretching across the floor like veins. Elliot sat down, inhaling deeply. His hand created a new file, final recording. No tape, no grace, no one else, only him and the unseen voice that had followed him for days. He whispered, almost soundlessly, "Begin." No reply, yet the low hum in the background stirred as if in agreement. Elliot tapped the tempo, 4/4-70 BPM. Slow, steady, gay. He began to sing. His voice was hoarse, fragile, but real. For the first minute, nothing happened. Then the other voice returned. It entered the track like something long awaiting its cue. No longer distant, clear, warm, flawless. It intertwined with his, sometimes leading, sometimes following. The two frequencies tangled like cords impossible to pull apart. On the monitor, the sound waves warped, merging, splitting, merging again, faster, stronger. The air grew heavier. The temperature dropped. His breath turned to mist before his face. Elliot kept singing, though his heart pounded wildly. Every line he sang was answered immediately, not just in unison, but with deeper emotion, sharper pain, as if the voice knew his thoughts. Then at the chorus, the lights went out. Only the monitor remained, glowing red with pulsing waveforms. The music warped, stretching unnaturally. The voice laughed, soft, trembling, filled with an eerie delight. Elliot stopped singing, but the recording did not. From the speakers, his voice continued, on tempo, on key, flawless, though he was silent. He stepped back, staring at the microphone. The small red light atop it blinked like a heartbeat. Final recording, still running. timestamp 4:42. On the screen, the second waveform slowly devoured the first, like a creature consuming its prey. Elliot tried to shut it down, but the cursor wouldn't move. The volume spiked, breaking into distorted waves. Amid the chaos, he heard his own voice again, reversed, looping, whispering. "I see you. Stay, stay." The walls vibrated, deep, rhythmic. The studio seemed to breathe. Lights flickered in time with his racing pulse. And then, the other voice spoke, using his tone, yet steadier, stronger. "Now we sing as one." The next verse no longer belonged to either of them. Two voices fused into one, resonant, haunting, inseparable. Everything outside ceased to exist. No time, no city, only the song, still spinning. When it ended, the screen went black. In the darkness, Elliot sat motionless, eyes open, hand resting on the microphone. The system auto-saved the file, naming it Elliot Final Awav. Inside the file, there was no trace of his voice, only the other one, singing the same song from start to finish, every breath perfectly aligned. The studio lights flickered once more. The microphone toppled, striking the floor with a dry, hollow thud. Somewhere in the speakers a faint laugh echoed, then vanished. Silence returned. But on the monitor, though no power remained, the waveform still pulsed, slow, steady, like the heartbeat of someone still inside the room. Chapter 5: The Endless Loop. 3 days later, they realized Studio 47E had never been officially handed over. The new owner, Mr. Harris, came by for inspection. Morning light barely pierced through the film of dust clinging to the window panes. The door was locked from the inside, yet the power still ran. From within came a faint, steady sound, the slow rotation of a tape reel. When Harris broke the lock and entered, the smell of scorched metal hit him. Hallway lights flickered, and the air conditioner exhaled like someone trapped in a dream. The main studio was unnaturally cold, the floor littered with shards from burst bulbs. On the control desk, the computer monitor was still on. Session 1147E. Recording in progress. No one was there. Only the microphone stood at the center, its cable stretched toward the wall where a dark, human-shaped stain had spread. Harris looked around, calling Elliot's name, but the sound that answered was his own voice, delayed by half a second, as though recorded and played back instantly. He shut off the power, yet the system kept running. The waveform on the screen pulsed softly, slow as breathing. Harris leaned in and pressed stop. Everything froze for a few seconds. Then the recording restarted on its own. A voice filled the room. Not loud, but disturbingly close. Elliot Marsh. Warm, low, and perfectly clear, singing alongside another voice, feminine, distant, half-whispering, half-laughing. The two blended seamlessly, every note and breath aligned, as though they had always been one. Harris stood, frozen. The tape kept spinning, slow, steady, endless, untouched. He glanced at the timer. 0, 1, 0, 2. Then it jumped to 47-0, as if the song had already been there. Each time he rewound it, the playback added another layer, more voices overlapping, dozens, hundreds, merging into a nameless harmony. Amid the chaos, one phrase emerged clearly. Don't stop the tape." Startled, Harris yanked the power cord from the wall. But the speakers still played, fading into a deep vibration, a low frequency that made the air itself quiver. Near the end of the track, Elliot's voice came one last time. "If you're listening, you're already part of it." Then, absolute silence. When the police arrived, there were no signs of struggle, no body. Only the file, Elliot Final Wolf, remained on the computer, along with 3 new files that had appeared afterward, each time stamped exactly at the moment the power outage occurred. All 3 were exactly 47 megabytes in size. The studio was sealed again. Technicians dismantled every wire and piece of equipment. Yet that, the security guard reported that the light inside room 47A was still on, despite the power being cut. He heard faint music drifting through the walls. No lyrics, just a lone melody looping endlessly like a jammed reel. The next morning, a new file appeared in the system's backup list, Session 1247A. Empty. No audio data. But when they pressed play, the waveform began to move. Slow, rhythmic, forming a steady pulse, eerily similar to a heartbeat. Outside, workers painted over the studio's old sign, trying to erase the name. Yet every night, the neighborhood still carried a faint echo, a song caught in the wind. Those who stood near the door said they could hear it. Sometimes a single voice singing in the dark, sometimes 2 voices blending, lingering until dawn. No one knows where the sound comes from, but every sound engineer who passes by says the same thing. That frequency doesn't belong to the living. And somewhere in the darkness of 47A, the reel keeps turning, slow, steady, never stopping. The loop never ends. 小，英吉里